One of the biggest matchups this time on Death Battle, the latest episode, Simon the Digger versus Kyle Rayner. Now, this matchup is a long time request of Death Battle fans. Definitely probably got some more prominence after Bantam versus Green Lantern, likely due to people wanting a matchup that a Green Lantern would lose due to them being mad about the outcome of that episode. But as seen with the G1 block, he actually did a small retrospective. This has been somewhat of a matchup for a while. At the very least, comparing Gurren Lagann to Green Lanterns is not unfounded. So this has definitely been a thing for a while. And in terms of Death Battle, has been even discussed by the team multiple times. Notably, it was an option in the 2D half of Season 10's Champion Poll, alongside Captain America versus Comrade Ichigo, Among Us versus Fall Guys, Ori versus the Knight, Finn and Jik versus Mordecai and Rigby, and the winner of that poll, which was Bill Cipher versus Discord. So far, actually, two of those that didn't win have been made since we got Among Us vs. Fall Guys at the end of last year. So hopefully we can get, honestly, the rest of them, because they're all pretty good. In my opinion, in terms of order, most interesting Captain America versus Ichigo, because I'm a Kamen Rider fan. Then Ori versus the Knight. I haven't played Ori in the Blind Forest, but I did play Hollow Knight, and it's cool, and Ori does seem cool, and I do own it. I should get back to it. And then Finn and Jake versus Mordecai and Rigby, just because it's cool, but I haven't watched Adventure Time or regular show. I've seen episodes of them, but I've not watched them. So it doesn't hit me the same way. Whereas at the very least, I have played Hollow Knight, and that game is great. It was also one of the episodes confirmed through the Death Battle Kickstarter. We got this confirmed at $450,000. And then also this episode did have a Death Battle cast associated with it. So this is an episode that has been discussed for a while. And about the episode, what's my opinion on overall? I think this episode, sick as hell. Super dope. And we'll get into parts of why it is super dope. But overall, just the matchup is good. There's a lot of history behind it. And just given things being said throughout the entirety of the waiting period, this was kind of especially for all the, I don't want to say background players, but a lot of the people that don't show up on camera that work on Death Battle. It was kind of like an all hands on deck situation. Everyone wanted a piece of it, everyone wanted in, and that shows, because there's a lot in this episode. So let's talk about it with the first combatant, Simon the Digger. Gurren Lagann is a show that I watched a while ago. I didn't watch it when it came out. I kind of only really started watching anime around the time that Gurren Lagann had come out, so around 2008-9ish. But I definitely didn't watch Gurren Lagann for a couple years until after the fact. I think probably around 2011, 2012-ish. But yeah, that show was awesome. Liked it a lot. And I watched it again at some point later down the line because it was just on Netflix, and I was like, yeah, I'll watch Gurren Lagann again. That show's good. One thing I didn't watch, though, was the Gurren Lagann movies, which I did get around to watching over the break period, actually more or less a couple days ago. And those are cool movies. They are not a substitute for the series, because it cuts out a lot of stuff and truncates some things, like the end of the first movie combines 3 fights into a single fight, which, while is visually super dope, is not what happened. Also, it moves and changes some things. During Rocio's big YouTube unfriendly scene, I definitely appreciated how that worked in the original series as opposed to the movie. In the movie, it just happens in a fucking office room, where it's a lot more dramatic in the original series. But it does add a bunch of cool shit to the end fight. Everyone gets their own Tengen Toppa mech, we get Super Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann, and it's just dope as fuck, because it's Gurren Lagann. In terms of the versus stuff, though, reading into stuff, because I've only seen essentially the main Gurren Lagann stuff being the original series and the 2 movies. There's a surprising amount of side content, and all of it is apparently extremely relevant due to Simon absorbing the multiversal labyrinth. So he essentially, everything is canon in a sense, or at least anything that has happened in a spin-off thing was absorbed into me and Simon. We do get a very fun moment during this when they calculate Super Galaxy Gurren Lagann's lasers that hit everywhere all at once, we have gotten the largest calculable feat in the show's history at 4.6 times 10 to the 117th power times faster than light. So SpongeBob has been dethroned. We saw an entire wall of them. The wiki here. Apparently, so the order goes in terms of fastest speed calcs is Samus, Wonder Woman, Shadow the Hedgehog, Superman, Superman again, Dr. Fit, Darkseid, Mega Man EXE for a while, and then SpongeBob, and now we have Team Diagram. It's a lot of just wacky stuff, but like some things in Gurren Lagann don't make sense, and they're not meant to make sense, even though the people writing it clearly thought through a way for it to make some amount of sense, since they clearly seem to understand how dimensions and like quantum mechanics work, which is very odd, given that they think about it in such a way that the characters can just break it. Gurren Lagann's main thing is just, there's a problem, hit it with a drill. If that doesn't work, get a bigger drill. And if that doesn't work, get a bigger drill. I don't know, it's sick. Gurren Lagann is great. And that's pretty popular. Less popular, on the other hand, mostly because people don't really know who he is that much, is Kyle Rayner. His half of the episode is pretty interesting, due to the fact that Kyle Rayner has next to no adaptations, so there's really no footage of anything to pull from to show for Kyle. He showed up in like 2 episodes of DC animated stuff, like 1 episode of Superman the Animated Series, which I haven't seen because I was watching through the DC stuff, and I got to the start of Superman, and that was around the time I just kind of put it down and forgot to pick it back up. I should get back to it. And also, he like has a cameo in one of the Justice League Unlimited episodes or something like that. But outside of that, really nothing. So everything else is either not him, so just another Green Lantern, usually like Hal Jordan or John Stewart from like either Justice League Unlimited, or there was the 3D animated one, which apparently is pretty good, so I should maybe check that out. Or it's a lot of heavily edited comic panels, because he's a comic book character, and pretty exclusively a comic book character, since they haven't done anything with Kyle Rayner in a while. Hopefully this episode will push him a little bit in the zeitgeist. Unlikely, but it would be cool to at least have like cartoon that features like Green Lanterns feature him a little bit. I think the issue is that if they wanted to do him, they would kind of want to do like the evil Hal Jordan and then bring in Kyle Rayner. Kyle Rayner, though, personally, to me, does feature 2 things that I think are very important. One bad, one good. Bad one is, his storyline is the namesake for fridging, which they do bring up and discuss fairly well. And it's, not a great trope. As I've said, I think in a previous one during Shigaraki vs. Mahito, that Jujutsu Kaisen features one of my, of things that I have read, one of the worst cases of fridging. But I haven't read these comics, so if I was to go back and read these Kyle Rayner comics, I would see if it's worse. It probably is, if it, is the word for which it is named after. On the good end, though, which they discuss very heavily here because it matters to him, I think that the emotional light spectrum that the Lanterns deal with is super fucking interesting. I think that is one of the coolest things in the DC universe. I think just conceptually it just works. And also just it expands the world. And that was one thing I remember being very pleased about whenever I got Lego Batman 3. And it was just essentially all about those. And Kyle being the White Lantern is one that merges them all together. We get just a lot of just interesting discussion about, I guess, high-end things with the DC universe. I still don't fully understand what the source wall is or what the life equation is, but I also didn't really understand what the anti-life equation was, so that's probably for the best. I will say, his part doesn't really conclude as well as some others, but also he's an ongoing comic character, so, his story never really concludes. And especially since from things I've heard from during this whole week period, he doesn't get much push at the moment from DC. I think as soon as they brought back Hal and John and Guy, they kind of left. and are trying to push like Jessica Cruz, is that her name? So maybe he's just like, he got kind of put on the back burner, and he just kind of shows up whenever they need the White Lanterns to do something. But still, it definitely, you get a lot of appreciation. They have a lot of appreciation here for Kyle and the Lantern mythos. Like, it's super cool. If only comic books did not require lots of context. And as someone that is a fiend for having context for things, it is fucking poison. It would be so cool if I just could get through it. But unfortunately, it's like, I would love to just sit, if I could just like fucking have the hyperbolic time chamber and just have like the fucking, and all the time to just read comics, and I would just go. Like, I would have like a curated like order to read things in. It would be so sick. I would go and see in, but it'd be cool. We've talked about our two cool guys. Let's talk about the fight. Starting with our voices, Simone in this episode is voiced by Kieran Regan, who we've met on Death Battle before, very recently in fact. He was the voice of Giorno in Joker vs. Giorno. I think I like him a lot better here. He does a really good job as Simone. He's good at the screaming. He's good at just yelling out those attack names. He is the voice of Andy Bogard as well. Huh. Well, he's not in the game yet, so we will see that when we see that. But yeah, really good as Simone. Kyle Rayner is voiced by Brandon Acosta with his debut on Death Battle here. And he also does a very good job, and I like it a lot. Definitely has a different vibe from whenever Hal Jordan was on. He's not voicing anything else I really recognize, but as Kyle here, really good job. Very much during the end when he has to do the oath. Very good. But we'll get back to that. The music for this episode is Spiral of Emotion by Brandon Yates featuring Suthu Ai, who also helped out with Mega Mania all the way back in season 6, so that's been a while. This song, though, very cool and good, and is more or less just a new version of Brandon Yates' commission track that he did for this matchup years ago, Will of the Drill. Despite the fact that he also released a remastered version of Will of the Drill like a couple days ago, this is also a remastered revamp of Will of the Drill. It was a very popular one, so it makes sense that he just tries to incorporate some of the same vibes into the actual fight. The song is good. It definitely gets you pumped. I think I do like it better than Will of the Drill. I think just because it's more focused, and especially because it was made in conjunction with the fight animation. Therefore, like essentially the motion and like timing of the fight works in its favor, as opposed to it just kind of being a song. Also, the artwork we have for this fight, sick as hell. Super tank on top of Gurren Lagann's hand bursting out of the source wall. You got fucking Kamina pointing up. It's breaking the logo. The Death Battle logo's on his back. Dope as hell. And speaking of dope as hell, let's talk about the fight. So this episode is 2D animated and seemingly animated by like a whole cast of people. The wiki here at least lists Zach Watkins, David Smith, Antu Duong, and Larry Winwood. So at least like 4 separate animators. And I think it's kind of obvious with that because there's definitely moments where like it shifts like kind of style. Not enough like to completely take you out of it, or like it's a clear intentional choice like back with Mob vs. Tatsumaki. Like the animation art styles changed pretty drastically from shop to shop, but that was kind of the point, and kind of in reference to how Mob Psycho 100 would do the kind of mixed media stuff. It's still kind of consistent, but there's clear moments where, like, Kyle will look different from shop to shop because someone else drew him. Fight is super cool. We get the immediate, reference to Ben 10 vs. Green Lantern with the beginning of the fight because, Green Lantern shows up to take a galactic super weapon into custody, and the other person decides, I'd rather not. And then a fight commences. I do like that Kyle immediately uses multiple types of constructs. Like we see he makes Balrog out of Green Lantern energy, but then he uses Orange Lantern energy to make a vacuum cleaner, which is apparently the poltergeist from the Luigi's Mansion. But also, that makes sense to make out of Orange Lantern energy, and then he makes a dragon out of Yellow Lantern energy. I'm trying to think if there's any that he missed. I think he does use more or less all of the Lantern abilities at some point in this fight. Super fun little tussle there. Knocks off Logon and then they fly into space, which happens very quickly. Was very cool. And I think overall this fight is like, it's a good length. One complaint I've heard about the fight is that it feels kind of short, and that's really just for one moment that happens here, where Simone jumps from Gurren Lagann to Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann. So he just skips Arc Gurren Lagann and Super Galaxy Gurren Lagann, which it doesn't feel great. It would be nice if there was like one or two like little moments with those, but I think it could have bloated the fight a little bit. Mostly because of what we have, I wouldn't take out anything. So if the idea was to just trim the fat of like, you know, we want to start on Gurren Lagann, but we need to get to Tengen Toppa and Super Tengen Toppa, I think cutting Arc and Super Galaxy is okay. Especially because Arc Gurren Lagann is probably the worst design of them all. Super Galaxy is pretty cool. And then Tengen Toppa might be the sickest design ever. But to combat the humongous galaxy universe-sized Kyle manifests the Thought Robot, which I find out through the wiki. I did not know this thing existed. I thought it was just a big Superman, which, to be fair, that's apparently what the Thought Robot is. Thought Robot is, yeah, Superman and Ultraman piloted a big Superman mech during Final Crisis. It's a big Superman robot, which is cool. And he manifests a fucking, like, a blue shield and a Green Lantern sword. They do a cool fight. They say the rap lines, fucking sick as hell. We go through the source wall, and we get this really nice part of Kyle. He just kind of tells him like to listen to the emotions, to stop fighting, and we get the moment with Kamina, and that's when we get to Super Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann. Dope as hell, and we get one of the coolest original attacks we've ever seen, where to battle the Giga Drill Brick, Kyle manifests a White Lantern Construct drill, and then 7 other Lantern Construct drills around that drill to make a giant drill of every emotion. It's so sick. And just like in the original Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann series, we don't end this in a giant mech fight. We end this with fucking hands. And not only is it hands, Kyle is reciting the Green Lantern Oath during it. We get the drill on drill, both drills brick, and then it's just fist versus fist. Let me see you grit those teeth. It was super dope. And probably the nicest ending for this. The ring, Kyle's ring, recognizes Simone as the next successor. So sick. I don't know how to describe this other than it was fucking super sick. I went into this, I think I definitely had some tempered expectations, mostly because I think if you have overwhelming expectations, you're gonna end up disappointed. That's, I think, one of the problems that happened with like Kratos vs. Asura. People went there with incredibly high expectations. I like that episode. I think it's pretty good. This I went into expectations because, like, just don't expect. If you expect good and get grit, you're on the moon, which is what happened here. Yeah, this episode, sick as hell. And then we had to talk about some like fucking wild shit in this breakdown. Was because like the things that usually consist of death battle winners, with which is stronger and faster, they are so strong and so fast it doesn't matter. And more or less the answer is just who has the stronger will, and the answer is Simone eventually, due to how spiral power works, whereas Kyle cannot contain all of his power. That's why he split the life equation to make his White Lantern core. Definitely, like, if we go to the tier list for this year, this goes to the fucking top. Like, no doubt, this is the best episode so far. It's so dope. We'll see if the excitement continues with the next episode being Wile E. Coyote versus Tomcat. So this is an episode that personally I am not that interested in. This is the episode that won the Tournament of Champions that was going to decide an episode for season 11. And then season 11 didn't happen because Rooster Teeth got shut down by Warner Brothers. Ironically, the people that own both of these characters. Out of all the episodes that were in that, I was not compelled by this one. Like, I have my own version of the Tournament of Champions. I'll throw it up here of what I would have went for. Wily vs. Tom wouldn't have made it past its own week. But to be fair, I thought that week that it was in wasn't very good. There wasn't. I don't think there's any good matchups in there. None that like excited me. But, you know, look, I wasn't excited for Bill versus Discord, and that episode ended up being great. I wasn't excited for Cole versus Alex, and that episode ended up being pretty okay. Like, I still think that episode was like way past its relevancy did. Like, it ended up fine, but I think that's just because we're at the point where Death Battle can just make at worst, Death Battle is fine. Like, they've kind of figured themselves out. Though one thing about this episode is that it has been confirmed one of the stretch goals from the Kickstarter was that one of the episodes in the, you know, confirmed episodes would be hand-drawn by Luis, who, you know, longtime Death Battle animator, notably fully hand-drew Samurai Jack versus Afro Samurai and Scooby versus Courage. So him bringing essentially what he did was Scooby versus Courage to Why They Cody versus Tomcat. We're probably gonna be in for some pretty fun animation for this one. It's not what I want, but it's apparently what everyone else wanted. So we'll see how it goes. And until then, see ya.